Our first storyteller, when she first came into the Zoom room, I could feel the light and peace coming from her. She is a person who thinks deeply about things, and her vision has contributed to the collective growth of all of our stories. And so please welcome to the stage Ruby Houghton Pitts.
Good evening, everyone. It's tight in here. Water. Water makes me beautiful. When I was a child, probably about 7 years old, and I'd get into trouble. And yes, I could get into some deep water trouble. After my parents had levied whatever the kind of punishment was going to be, I would make a beeline for the bathroom. And I'd get in the bathroom and I'd turn the water on and I'd start washing my hands. I would get water and soap up to my elbows. I'd be washing and washing and washing. And all of a sudden there would be a, "Ruby Rebecca, what are you doing in that bathroom so long?" That would be my mother. I grew up in a family of 5 with a mother and a father in one bathroom. So that was a good question, don't you think? So I'd dry my hands off, unlock the door, and she would say, "What were you doing in the bathroom so long, girl?" And I would say, "Washing my hands of the whole filthy mess." And my siblings, they didn't think it was so funny, but I think my parents, because they told the story over and over again, thought it was hysterical. So as I got older, I learned a little bit about water. I learned that the Earth's surface is 70% water. I learned that the human body is 70+% water. Water is powerful. It's dominant. It can rage like Katrina, like Maria. It can also be soft like the summer dew on the grass. It can be peaceful and very calm. Now, my relationship with water has continued for my life in its entirety. I love standing under waterfalls. So on vacation, if there's a waterfall, I want to stand under it. I want the water to touch me from head to toe. I want to open and close my eyes because water distorts or changes your vision and your hearing. It makes me feel alive. Now there's a place that I love going, and I've taken my husband there, God bless him. It's called Brighton Bush on the West Coast. It's actually a nudist spa. He didn't know that when we went there. But I'll tell you, you drive up into the mountains, waving back and forth, kind of like the wind, and then you park and you have to walk in. Now my husband's a native Chicagoan, he's a definite city boy. So that whole mountain thing and getting out and walking and then being told, and you're going to have to take off all your clothes. He hasn't been back, to tell you the truth. So when you step out of the car, what you can sense are evergreen trees. Those trees cover the pathway and there are pine needles along the way. And the one thing that you can do is you can smell the water. So we're talking about a hot springs, water coming up out of the ground, ponds that are cold, warm, and hot, under a canopy of the sky. I've been there on rainy days. in bright sunshine, and I've even walked that path in the snow to get to water. Water rejuvenates me. It helps to bring me back. It centers me. It's my safe space. It's my caring space. Now, I don't have to do all of that in order to experience what I just told you. I can run a bubble bath, lavender, which is my favorite, pour myself a glass of wine, turn my music on loud or soft, depending upon my mood, slip down in a hot tub and relax. That water is the same kind of water that I can experience in the spring. It brings me back. So now, I'm a swimmer. And there's somebody that says she's a swimmer. I'm a swimmer. And I swam competitively growing up. You can see these long legs, long arms. I didn't know what I was going to do with them, so my parents put me in the water and they figured it out. But I love swimming in the ocean. And not just kicking it at the shore, I like to swim out in the ocean. And I like to think about, as I'm bobbing up and down and waving back and forth with the water, I like to think about what's underneath me. All the colors, the different colors of fish, the different sizes, that experience of sea plants that move with, not against the water, and they take you with them. It's a very calm and a very soothing feeling. So I'm not only in that kind of water, but I also recognize that water is my rejuvenator. So when I think about caring spaces, loving spaces, encouraging spaces in my life, I think water revives me. It rejuvenates me. It brings me back from wherever this world takes me. And it makes me new all over again. It's like a rainbow that comes out after a storm. Water makes me whole again and beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruby. I see there's some folk looking for seats. There's a single chair right here, and we could fit 3 or 4 over here. So please come on and grab a seat.
We want to know where that spa is.
She's going to tell you. We're going to have an intermission. You can check in. All right. Our next storyteller, this is her first time performing with Soul Collective, and I can't tell you how thrilled we are to have her be part of the circle because of the way that she has crafted words together and of the intention that she has had as she's thought about her story. And so some of y'all know when you get up here for the first time, it can be kind of scary. So I need, as she comes to the stage, you all to give like special, extra, super love to Lauren, who is shouting out this beautiful story on her birthday.
You know, it has been surprisingly challenging to think about a story about spaces of care. And it's been challenging not because I don't really have many examples to draw from, but I'm village made. So I have been very well loved and cared for by my brother, who will listen to me say the same story over and over as if he's heard it the first time. Or cousins who make me feel like I'm the coolest, dopest person in the room. Or seasoned colleagues who share their notes and pull up a seat at the table so I can sit down. Friends who remind me who I am when sometimes I forget. And I say this really humbly because I know that the spaces of care that I've enjoyed have been where God's love resides. And this doesn't mean that I've had a red carpet welcome, or life has been easy, because life for me ain't been no crystal stair. But it is an acknowledgement that I have been covered by the prayers of my mother, my aunt, my village, people whose names I know and don't know. So when I had to think about spaces of care, I really had to think about the first person who's cared for me, the person who taught me how to care. I had to think about my first home. So this is a story about my mother, Beverly Woods. At the age of 12, she knew she had been called to care because in elementary school, her father got really sick. So every day for 2 weeks, she walked home for lunch from Gillespie Elementary School to Burnside. And she was really close with her dad, so this was a chore that was not a chore at all. It's something she took pleasure in. She took great pride in arranging the saltines around his cup of chicken noodle soup, and she felt purpose knowing that she was doing something to make him feel a little bit better. It was actually her dad who said, "You know, Beverly, you should think about being a nurse. You're really good at this." So at age 12, in 1968, she decided she was going to be a registered nurse. And this wasn't a small dream in 1968 at age 12 because she really didn't see a lot of black nurses. But it was something that she took very seriously. So she applied and it got accepted into the School of Nursing at Bradley University. She started with 6 other black women, but she was the only black woman in her class to graduate, and the second black woman in the history of the university to graduate from the School of Nursing, and this was in 1979. So she got her first job here at the University of Chicago, and she was here for about 15 or 16 years until she decided she was going to take her talents to Harvey, Illinois, and become a school nurse. And I remember the first year of the first summer when she became a nurse, because that was the first summer she did not make me go to camp, you know, those all-day 6 to 6 camps. And that was the first summer I got to spend all day with my mother. Now, my mom has this, like a lot of moms, has this really wonderful way of making ordinary things feel very magical. And so we would take errands and we would go to Office Max or Staples, and my brother and I would dart to the furniture section to see who could sit at the biggest desk with the best chair, because that was the boss. Or we would go on Saturday mornings to fold bulletins in church. And while we were riding around the city on our magical errands, doing ordinary things that felt really special, we would play a game called the license plate game. And the license plate game is an easy game, but it's a highly competitive game where you would blurt out as loud as you could the license plate from another state. So seeing states like Indiana or Wisconsin was easy. Those were easy points. Florida and California were a little more hard. But one morning, when my mom and I were rushing to get me to school, we pulled up to the light on 87th and Lafayette. And when we looked up, we saw the license plate from Alaska. And that was like the jackpot. Now, if you know me, if you've ever experienced me, you know I love conversation. I love to talk. I love small talk. I love big talk. I love beating around the bush. I love cutting right to the chase. I love talking a little shit. I love saying nice words. I love a speech. I love sharing ideas. I've been talking since I learned words. And my mother keeps a report card from kindergarten where my teacher writes, next to all those boxes she checked, "Lauren talks continuously without ceasing." So imagine the care and patience that she's had to have all these years to help nurture and discipline my voice. And she would tell me when she was pregnant, the conversations she would have with God, how she prayed for a daughter that would have a voice of strength, that shared her ideas, who offered her opinion when people asked or maybe when they didn't. And if you've experienced me and you know anything about mothers, black mothers who pray, you know those are the prayers that get answered. And she had this wonderful way of nurturing my sense of wonder and my curiosity, and always allowed me to ask why. She was so careful in helping me to develop my creativity. She was the person who built a playroom for my brother and I. And in this space, I got to dream big and create characters. Before I understood the language, I really got to experience the power of a room of your own. And in this room, I got to make my first mixtape. Now in the 90s, songs didn't come as often as they do. You heard a couple of songs a day. So I had to sit at the table and wait, staring at my boombox until Janet Jackson's "That's the Way Love Goes" came back on so I can press record. And this was the place where I upcycled my socks so that my Barbies could have custom outfits. And this was a place where she made sure I had black dolls and a microscope so I could see the beauty in really, really small things. And she made sure that I had a bookshelf with black books. And where there weren't black books, she would take a brown coloring pencil and fill in their hue so they would match my skin. And I remember when we were moving out of Princeton Park and I was packing up books and I pulled out a book. It was a Bible for early readers, or children's Bible for early readers. And I opened up the book and you can still see the impressions from the brown colored pencil that she had over the face of Jesus. So I knew that there were black people in the Bible. And I keep all of these memories and I hold them dear as I think about the spaces that I'm called to care for. So not too long ago, I moved into a place of my own, and it's big and it's spacious, and I have enough room to build my own playroom. Now I'm an artist and I'm an adult, so we call it a studio. And in this studio, it has all the bones that was in my playroom. I have to have a table where I can write stories and assemble my art to build a collage. I need to have an easel in the corner where I can play with paints and experiment. I need to have music and a playlist that makes me want to dance. I need to make sure that there is a rug, a colorful rug on the floor so I can sit and be grounded. There must be a big window with enough light so I can feel the warmth of the sun. My mother showed me how to care for every space I enter. She showed me how to care for the people that I work with, that I stand alongside. She showed me how to care for a community that I love so much. My mother showed me how to care, and this has taught me how to love. Thank you.
Thank you, Lauren. All right. Y'all having a good time? I hope so. If anyone in the standing group would like a seat, there is a single seat right here. If there's anyone, there's also another seat in the back. Raise your hand if you have a seat next to you, okay? There's another one right here. So come on and grab a seat if you would like. I'm excited to move the program along to introduce our next teller, who is one of the founders of the organization and who has been deeply committed to creating a space for women of color, because while there are a lot of storytelling spaces in Chicago, I'm not aware of other spaces that are specifically dedicated to women of color having space to tell their stories. And that seems critically important in the world that we are living in right now. So please, in celebration of her work and her wonderful voice, welcome to the stage, Shelley Davis.
Thank you, Emily. So a few weeks ago, I was tasked with an exercise of writing my family tree going back 5 generations. Luckily, I was able to call my 91-year-old aunt and interview her over the phone. She started in the 1850s with my great-great-grandmother, Allie. Now, I had heard of Allie before, but I never knew her name. I knew she was a midwife, but I didn't know that much about Allie. Turns out Allie was the town midwife. I had always had this picture that she had only helped Black families and only helped Black mothers, but she helped everyone in Eden, North Carolina, the town that my mother and my aunts grew up in. And so my aunt would tell the story of walking into town with Allie and women hugging her around the neck, Black and white, and introducing Allie to the children she helped give birth to. My aunt told me about my great-great-grandfather, who was half Cherokee. Now, I was thinking, don't all Black folks think they got, you know what I'm gonna say, Indian blood, right? Like we all have that thing. But since she said the name of a tribe, I was like, all right, I guess we do. We got Indian blood. So he was half Cherokee. She remembered driving up and him sitting on the porch waiting for a visit. So those were our roots. Then we moved up the trunk to my Aunt Shelley. And my Aunt Shelley was very special, since I'm named after her. She was very special because really, my Aunt Shelley was the only way that my dad could go to college and to grad school. So my dad moved from Alabama to Atlanta to go to Morehouse, and he lived with my Aunt Shelley. Then he moved from Atlanta someplace else where he was in the Army, and then up to St. Louis to Washington University and lived with my Aunt Shelley. Somehow I've never known how Aunt Shelley got back to Alabama when I met her as a child, but I know that there was a husband involved, and I remember my cousin Michael, her son. All these people that cared for him along the way to help him meet his goals. I thought about my parents in the middle of our tree trunk. And they were both born during the Depression, married in 1960. And for 10 years, they struggled with their own fertility challenges, being rejected from specialists, even though there were fertility treatments back then. They were mainly for white families, I suppose. And then they went through the adoption process until I was brought home. I included my birth mother, who I was told was 19 when I was born, in college and had limited choices. This is pre-Roe v. Wade. I wondered about all the limitations of her choices and how she navigated the adoption process, and I thanked her for the gift of my parents. And then I added our branches and our leaves, our children. Our children who were 14 and 18. Our daughter who was 18, who now, her and her peers have lost the freedom of Roe v. Wade. All these women that will have limitations in their choices. It made me wonder when that choice was lost before. I did a little bit of research in 1910, the same year my grandfather was born. Who is going to care for these women? Who is going to care for these children, or the process of not having children by choice? This exercise was such a gift. It was such a gift to learn all of this history, to celebrate all of the care of all the generations that came before us. It also instilled fear for the future. It instilled anger about the missteps of the past. And it inspired a wish that we do better. We do better to take care of ourselves. We do better to take care of the women that we can see and that we can't see, because we need more. We need more opportunity and more choices than we have today. Thank you.
Thank you, Shelley. This quote is from Assata Shakur. It is one of the quotes that we used in our workshop. We can't afford to be spectators while our lives deteriorate. We have to truly love our people and work to make that love stronger. Working to make that love stronger happens in a lot of different ways, and sometimes it means we have to confront challenges. And one of the things that I appreciate about the energy that our next teller brought to the workshop is that she was willing to look at some difficult things and to figure out how do we address them, how do we sit in them, how do we figure out how to navigate our way out of them. And so it has been an honor to work with her, and she has a beautiful story to share tonight. Please welcome Kelly Salisbury.
Thank you, Emily. Thank you so much. Hi, everybody. So, I've been meditating on this, this theme of spaces of care. And what came up for me isn't so much physical spaces, like actual physical spaces or places, but more so people. The people in my life, my family, my friends, my teachers and mentors, as a young child growing up, and then also, as a young adult in my 20s after graduating college and coming back to Chicago. And, a lot of these spaces of care in human form, were people who loved me and nurtured me and birthed me and taught me and hugged me and challenged me, and people who really shaped me into the person I am today. And some of those people harmed me, violated me, dismissed me, gaslit me, marginalized me. So when I think of some of my fond memories growing up as a young child, there's some people who come to mind and some specific memories that come to mind right away. So one of them is my mom, my beautiful mother, Dolores. And I remember being about 3 or 4 years old, and I was on vacation with my family. It was the first time I was on an airplane, and we had flown to Nassau, Bahamas, and I was really excited. And I remember one day my mother she just looked strikingly beautiful. She had on this beautiful green halter dress. It was a print halter dress, and showed off her beautiful, lovely long neck, her small waist, and her big, pretty legs that she was known for growing up in Morgan Park. All the boys loved her legs, and the girls wanted them. And I remember going, oh, my mom is so pretty. Gosh, she's gorgeous. And I remember her one of the days on our vacation, combing my hair, getting me ready in the morning and talking to me. And I remember being excited about going to the beach. And she put coconut scented suntan lotion on my skin. And I just love the feel of it, and I love the smell of it. To this very day, whenever I smell coconut, I think of the beach, I think of Bahamas, I think of times with my family at Nassau, I think of delicious food and warm smiles. I think of really fond memories. I also think of that time when I came home from first grade, and I remember being so sad, and I came home crying, and my mom said, "What's wrong?" And I said, "Mom, we're learning reading, and all of the other kids, they know how to read by now, and they can do it, and I just feel like I'm just really struggling. I can't read." And I remember just feeling stupid, and I remember feeling defeated, and even though I had these wonderful teachers who were encouraging, and my mom, who was a public school teacher. She retired in 2004 after 32 years as a CPS teacher. And I remember my mom giving me a hug and a kiss. And she told me not to be defeated. She said, "It's okay, you can do this. You can do this." And so she would reinforce every day I came home from school. I had more school with Mom. My dad was still at work. So it was my mom, who taught me every day. And so she would read aloud to me, and she would, help me with the phonics and reinforce the lessons my teachers taught me during the day. And she would have me read aloud to her, and she would, celebrate my success and the progress I was making. And I remember learning how to love reading. And my mom fostered and nurtured that in me. And through that, she taught me a valuable lesson of how much believing in someone and being kind and patient can make a difference in the world. And she made a huge difference in my world and my life. And I wound up becoming one of the top readers in class, just as an aside. But I also, not that I'm competitive, but she also taught me a couple things. One, you don't always have to be the first at something. And two, she said something. She said, not all flowers blossom at the same time, but that doesn't make them any less of a flower. I remember, I think, what was it? I was in 4th or 5th grade. No, I was like 6 or 7 years old. And I was learning how to ride my bike. My dad taught me how to ride my bike. And I was making progress, and I was so excited. And I couldn't wait to be able to learn how to ride my bike so I could ride with my friends Yvette and Jory and Cappy in the neighborhood. But I took a fall. And I remember starting to cry, and my father rushed to me, and he gave me a big hug, and he said, "You're all right, baby." And he took my finger, which I had scraped, and it had started bleeding, and he said, "You'll be okay." I remember my 4th grade teachers, Mrs. Tatum and Mrs. Robinson at St. Felicitas on Blackstone, one of the many black schools, parochial school, black schools that is no longer here. And I remember Mrs. Tatum and Mrs. Robinson, who had super high standards and very little patience for BS and half-assery and tomfoolery. They demanded excellence. They demanded excellence of not only me, but every single student in the class. They taught me what it means to start with high standards and know that whether standards are high or low, our children will meet them. I remember seeing my aunts, my Aunt Carol, my Aunt Vi, and my Aunt Charlotte. Those are my mom's sisters. And these are fierce, gorgeous women. And I remember looking up to them growing up as a young girl, and they were always impeccably dressed, never a hair out of place. They always provided sartorial inspiration and sass. They wore what is it called? What's that? Fashion fair makeup, foundation, radiant red lipstick, and they always smelled like Chanel No. 5, L'air du Temps, opium. Does that sound familiar? Yeah. And I remember they could give me hugs and kisses and warmth, and they could also scold me and cut me a stare and look through people. And these are women who could be warm and inviting, and they could also be cold and distant when necessary, and they suffered no fools. Then I remember being a young 20-something, right? I graduated from college. I was excited. I'm in my early 20s. I'm excited about making a difference in the world. I grew up in a very politically active family. My parents were a part of Mayor Harold Washington's, not a part of, but they were a volunteer on his campaign, and they registered voters, and they did all the things a lot of people in the city were doing. And Current events were always staples at our dinner table at home. And so that's the kind of family I grew up in. And they really shaped me into the person that I am today, which is why I'm interested in advocacy and equity and justice and all of those things. And I remember being this young 20-something ready to get to work and be with fellow activists and people who wanted to make a difference in the world. And I joined these different collectives and spaces, organizing spaces and advocacy spaces and groups. I'm like, yes, I'm around my people. And it was about bringing our best selves to the work. And I remember meeting people who mentored me, who befriended me, especially as a young lesbian, going through a very difficult time with family who did not accept me. Some family members didn't. In fact, one of my aunts I grew up being very close to disowned me in 2002, made it very clear she wanted nothing to do with me anymore. And the rare times we see each other is at family funerals. So I remember being like, yes, I'm excited. And I got mentored and learned how to advocate and use my voice and create community. But I also remember many of these spaces feeling confining. Walking in some spaces where all I did was walk in and say hi, only to be met with, right? Or silence, or asking the wrong question, or being too liberal, or not being liberal enough, being too black, not being black enough, being too feminist, not being feminist enough, being too much, or not being enough. And I remember what that felt like. I remember going, this doesn't feel like justice. This doesn't feel like inclusivity. This doesn't feel like community. In these spaces, however, spaces of slander, spaces where I felt marginalized, spaces where, interestingly enough, after saying something that was unpopular, saying something or doing something that was not in alignment with what someone's view or expectations were of me, somehow my email address wound up getting dropped from the contact list. So no more invitations to meetings, no more invitations to gatherings. All of a sudden, people who were friendly to me and would meet me with hugs or fist bumps pretended like they didn't see me out and about. This hurt me to my core. This was not a space of care. This was not community. And yet, in many of these spaces is where I learn to use my voice, where I learn to develop and summon my courage, where I learn to not be so dependent on other people's approval of me. I learned to dare speak anyway. And so while meditating on these spaces of care, I've learned that some of these spaces have been people who I've all learned from. Learned from what I want to do and what I want to be, and what I don't want to do and don't want to be. And through it all, I've learned that the best space of care for me is the space within me. Thank you.
Thank you. You notice I switched mics. That means it's my turn to tell my story. That's why I'm over here. So one of the things about personal stories, many of you know me as a storyteller, know that I primarily tell folktales, African stories, history. I don't do a lot of personal stories. And this collective has pushed me to work on personal stories. And this is a story that I have rarely spoken out loud. So I thank you for the opportunity to be gathered in this space to share it. So, after my first two sons were born, I found out that I was pregnant for a third time. Not exactly planned, but welcome and excited. I love children, looking forward to it, and thinking I'm finally gonna get my girl. And so I was very determined to be the mom who picks my kids up from school. So I was working a whole bunch of different kinds of jobs that I could piece together that would allow me to be able to pick my kids up from school and take them home. And that meant that one of the jobs that I had taken on was a job teaching at Purdue. And I would take the bus there on Mondays for my Monday night class and get up very early on Tuesday mornings and take the train back. Well, after, I would say, probably 2.5 months, I had gotten really big. And my doctor was thinking, maybe this is twins. And I was working with an African priest, spiritual leader, who I had a reading with, who said, this is twin girls. And these are the things that you need to do to prepare for them. And so I was very excited about this and doing everything that I knew how to do to take care of myself and nurture this pregnancy. And so on one of these trips to Purdue, you know, I had some friends there who I was teaching with, and then also a very close friend's parents lived there. So I went out to eat, and my friend had picked this sandwich shop, and I had some kind of sandwich, and then went and taught my class. And the people that I was staying with, they were elderly, and it was very special to them to have me there. And so they would get up and make these very special breakfasts for me before I would get on the 6 o'clock train. So I got up and had this sausage and, you know, got onto the train. And as the train is going, I am suddenly in a lot of pain. Like a lot of pain. And I'm thinking, I don't know what to do. I don't think I can tell them to stop the train. I think I just have to, like, get through it, you know? And so I'm kind of shifting and squirming and just, like, really trying to hold it together for this train ride to finally be over. And when I get home, I notice that I'm spotting a little bit. And I know that, you know, sometimes this happens in pregnancy, and I know that I have an ultrasound scheduled the next day to find out if I'm having twins. And so I anxiously call my doctor and say, you know, I've had some pretty violent pain and I'm spotting a little bit. And she says to me, if it's a miscarriage, we can't stop it. And I remember thinking, what? Like, that's ridiculous. What do you mean you can't stop it? That's what you're supposed to do. You're a doctor. You're supposed to fix things. And she was like, we can't stop it. And so I had a very frightful night with very little sleep. And I had a friend who was very close to who was experiencing a period of depression, and she was staying with us at the time. And so she went with us to the doctor's appointment. And so here I am, thinking that I'm going to have the moment of great reveal to see if it's actually twins. And she turns on the ultrasound and she says, I'm so sorry. This is no longer a pregnancy. There's not a baby. And I remember looking at the screen and thinking it looked so empty. And I remember being so frightened and angry and myriad of emotions that I didn't have words for. And my friend looked at me and said, sometimes it takes a lot of courage to be born. And I held that. And I just wanted the whole thing to be over, and I just wanted to go home. And the doctor says, well, you're going to have to come back for a D&C. And I'm like, it's not over yet? Like, is this not enough? And she's like, no, you have to come back for a D&C because this is what we have to do to take care of your body and make sure that you're okay. And so I come back for the D&C, and I remember that I just hated everything about it. I hated it. I hated that I was laying on this cold table in this yucky hospital gown, and I hated that the language that they were using, talking about evacuation, which somehow made me think that people who didn't know that I had lost the baby would think that I was choosing to have an abortion, and I was like, I want everybody to know that I wanted them. And I just felt so incredibly cold and alone. And when it was over, I went to do the thing that I always do. I want to read about things so that I can have it make sense, because I didn't have anybody that I knew who had had a miscarriage. Nobody talked about it. I felt like I was alone in the world. So I went to Women and Children First Bookstore, and I went to look for a book about miscarriage. And I found this tiny little book. It was white with green writing, and it said, Ended Losses. And I read other people's stories about having lost their children, and it made me feel not so alone. And in the reading of those stories, I kept coming back to my friend saying to me, sometimes it takes a lot of courage to be born. And that helped me. It helped me feel like maybe they were there, but they weren't ready to be here. And sometimes that's the case. And so I am grateful for the opportunity of having been in a space where I had a friend who cared about me enough to be that vulnerable and give me the insight that I needed. Thank you. This evening's performance is in two halves, and this story is the last story of the first half. So it is super exciting to bring to you one of the other founders of Soul, who tells stories with just an extremely unique style. And I love it that she always makes me laugh. And I'm sure you're going to find a place to laugh and feel your heartstrings tugged. Please give it up for Terry Johnson.
Thanks, Emily. Thanks, everybody, for being here. I'm aging. Yeah, I know, obvious, right? And I am lucky and grateful and thankful that I get to stand up here and say that out loud. But I gotta tell you, it is weird. It's like I'm having an out-of-body experience, and I'm living it and watching it at exactly the same time. I'm a scientist looking down into a microscope, into a petri dish, and that petri dish is me and the aging. It's a fascinating subject. Let's start with my hair. My hair is curly and brown and dark normally, but there's some gray wiry things joining. They are at war, and the grays are winning. I've got this hair in my chin and on my neck that no matter what I do, I can pluck, I can shave, I can wax, and those bad boys show up in exactly the same spot. My esthetician told me recently that skin and hair have memory. See, I told you, fascinating. And if that's true, that means that my eyebrows that are thinning are losing their memories. My mustache that is thickening is making new memories. And my toes want to have a whole party going on with this memory thing. What is up with toe hair? My skin is shifting. I've got these parentheses around my mouth. I've got what I will not call crow's feet. I've got these laugh lines that are deepening. The skin on my neck is crepey and wrinkly. It looks like a lot what I think a baby dragon skin might look like. And speaking of dragons, I caught a glimpse of myself in a Zoom meeting the other day. And my hands, that skin is crepey and thinning, those veins are popping and they are blue and green, and you can see my bones. So, what are these? Dragon claws. Everything that used to be Flat and soft is now hard, and all of the things that are hard are now soft. All the things that were tight are jiggling a whole lot. What was flat is actually really curvy now. My prayers, my wishes, my dreams as a teenager to have boobs finally happened at 45. And now I have the privilege and the honor of buying expensive bras, especially if I want them to be pretty, because they're G cup. A cups and B cups and C cups are dainty and pretty and lacy and beautiful and everywhere, and designs are poppin' and the colors are beautiful. G cups? Industrial. They're stretchy and thick, and they have a job to do. They gotta minimize, they gotta support. It's as if sometime in the universe, the bra industry determined that smaller breasts need to be caressed and loved and swathed in beautiful fabric. Bigger breasts need to be locked down, controlled, contained. My bigger breasts are heavier and rounder, and they're sitting on top of my double gut. I've named it Millie is at the top, Tilly is at the bottom. My thighs are getting closer. It's a good thing they like each other. My knees and my feet are so loud. They talk all the time. They're moaning and they're groaning and they're snapping and they're popping and they're crackling, especially in the morning when I'm trying to get ready. I have tools. I need tools for everything. I have glasses and contacts, and I have reading glasses because the contacts aren't actually strong enough. I have captions everywhere. I do in fact need and have hearing aids, but I don't have them in tonight. It's just too much. I would like to add to that list of tools a leave, braces for my ankles and my knees, ice packs, heating pads. And I apologize to anyone who is close to me tonight. That smell is a Tiger Balm back patch. Every day, and I am not exaggerating, every single day, I am reminded of this shift and this change. Everything that I love requires all kinds of preparation. If I want to have sex, I got to get the replens, the toys, and a lot of time. Dinners out with friends are no longer just how are two people or more than two people going to figure out where we're going to go. We got to figure out and do a whole menu analysis of sodium and salt and butter and fried food and how many fish options are there? Can someone please bring the Lactaid? If I want to take a walk, go to the beach, pet a dog, I got to grab some Zyrtec. Champagne, bourbon, cocktails require a surge of water, which means that every event has way more bathroom breaks than they need to. It's kind of taken away from the energy and the enjoyment. However, if I do not have the water, there will be hell to pay. Recovery time is long. So again, every day, every single day, I am reminded that I am getting older. My youth is fading, therefore I should just give it up now because my relevance is ending. And so I can either embrace crondom or I can dive right into the anti-aging industrial complex and spend a fortune. I'm struck by how every interview, every discussion about women of a certain age who's just out there living their lives, creating, building, nurturing, activating, loving, caring for other people, and occasionally they do it in high heel shoes. We treat them like they're the alien species somehow. And every article has in it 3 words or some version of these 3 words: for her age. For her age. Now, in spite of all that, I have never felt better. I am alive in ways, awake in ways that I just wasn't before. I feel strong. I feel powerful. I feel sexy. I feel beautiful. I feel delicious and juicy. Now, here's the moment where I, as storyteller, am supposed to tell you, audience, about the big moment, the huge epiphany in my life. And I'm supposed to give you the Bible verse or the poem or the book or the TED Talk that got me there. I don't think it works like that anymore. I don't think there's a big moment. I don't think that it happens like that. I think it's smaller moments. I think it's more like when you're looking at a camera and you're trying to take a photograph and you're moving the lens and it's just that moment, unpredictable, but you turn it in just the right way and the picture's there and you can see it clearly. Or you take that same motion with a kaleidoscope, tiny little shift in the motion, and the perspective in the picture changes completely. Or maybe there's a switch and it's buried in our bodies somewhere, and you have to be a certain weight or a certain age for this switch to kick in. All I know is that when the switch was off, lots of chaos, lots of confusion, lots of critique, lots of criticism, all in my head, by the way. The inner critic showed up for work every day and did overtime. All kinds of questions about, when am I ever going to get it together? Am I good enough? Am I smart enough? Am I pretty enough? Does any of this really matter? Everybody else seems to have it together. What is wrong with me? How do I fix this? Lots of frenzy, lots of discomfort, lots of anxiety. And then one day the switch went on. And there was calm. And there was ease. It was quiet. Now, I'm not going to lie to you and tell you that the fears and the insecurities went away, because they didn't. At least once a day, I think to myself, what the hell am I doing? I think what's different now is I know something. And in that deep knowing, I finally am comfortable in my skin. And here's what I know. I know that I have enough. I have absolutely everything I need. I do enough, and I am enough. I am enough. And that, my friends, is absolutely enough. Thank you for listening.
Hey everybody. Did you enjoy the first half? Are you enjoying yourself? Okay, this is a part of the show when I have announcements, I have asks, and I have introductions. So I'll start with the latter and then work my way up. My name is Lauren Woods. I am the newest teller to Soul Collective. I was in the audience of the spring show last year, so I've always kind of wanted to be a storyteller. As you heard, I love talking, and I attended the virtual show last spring, and I kind of wrote down in those ways that you make small dreams, like maybe I should join. And I think I told Kelly, and she took me seriously. And she's like, okay, well, I will introduce you. And then I got really nervous, and I didn't say anything. And then I decided that I was going to step into courage, and that's how I'm here today. So I say all that because if there are other tellers in the room, and you're looking for your sign, and you're thinking that this is something you might want to do, this is your official invitation to join us. That's one way you can be involved if you're a teller. Another way that you can be involved, when you sat down, you might have saw a gift bag. In that gift bag is a little code, and if you take your phone and you put it up to that code, you'll see a place where you can give birthday donations, if you like, in support of Soul Collective. So that's another way that you can be involved. This is a volunteer-ran operation. As Shelley mentioned earlier, it started in 2020. We are as strong as our words in our community. So we need your support to continue growing. If there is something in your heart that you can give, we ask you to speak freely from your heart and use that QR code. Another way that you can join us to get involved is to spread the word. So if you enjoyed yourself tonight, please go back and tell 3 people how much fun you had. Ask them to go to our website. Ask them to go to our YouTube page. We want to get to at least 1,000 subscribers. That's our first 10-yard goal, and we know that you can help us get there. After 1,000 subscribers, then YouTube begins to monetize, and that's another way that we can keep this operation going. So please go to YouTube. We ask you to go to our Instagram page. Please follow us, like, share, do all of that stuff. Another way that you can get involved is if you have your talent. There are a lot of jobs that help this operation go. So if there's something that you have in your heart that you think will be helpful to our collective growing, please pull one of us to the side and let us know. There is a job for everyone. There's room enough for everyone, and all are welcome on this train. I'm looking to see if there's anything I left out. Oh, that's it. So you all remembered everything I said. Please, just keep following us. Thank you very much.
All right, you've noticed that the table has been populated by a variety of packages. The second half of this show is about care packages and how care packages can come in different forms in different ways. And so each of the tellers is going to tell you about their package, a story from their package, how it touches their heart. As we're leading up to Thanksgiving, a lot of this has to do with being grateful. As we're leading toward whatever kind of holidays that celebrate light, a lot of this has to do with that. And we hope that your spirit will be warmed by these packages that are shared. And our first, the tellers will go one right after the other in this half. So I'm going to sit down and make way for Lauren, who's going to start it off. Celebrate Lauren, please.
Thank you. Okay. For as long as I can remember, I have been fascinated with the mail. And this is likely started around 7 years old. My father lived in North Carolina, and we would talk on the phone. And one time on a conversation, he casually said that he would send me something in the mail. Now, you know, as a child, casual things that you say in the mail are actually declarations. And these declarations are promises that must be kept. So every day for what felt like forever, I would run behind my mom when she was going to get the mail and ask if anything had come for me. And every day, day after day after day after day, she would look and say, "No, Pi, not today." Until one day, that package came in the mail, and it was the package that my father promised. And in that package, there were a lot of things that are lost to memory, but one thing I remember was a pink and white Minnie Mouse analog watch. And I remember because I hadn't really learned how to tell time that well. I still don't tell time that well. But it was that day that I fell in love with the mail. I also fell in love with the mail because my grandparents worked for the post office. My grandfather delivered the mail, and my grandmother sorted the mail. Now, by the time I had come into the world, my grandparents were old and slower and had long retired. But stories occasionally of how my grandfather delivered downtown would surface. Now, my grandfather was very charming. And as you all know, male people are people you anticipate seeing every day. He had the route, the Stone Container Building. He would deliver to places like WLS radio station And just in conversations, telling what he likes, hearing what others like, sometimes he would get sample records. And this is why we have such an extensive record collection from my grandfather that is still maintained by my family. He would ask questions, he would remember small details, and every day he would see the same people. And of course, relationships are built. So holiday time, he would get my mom and my aunt kind of fondly tell these stories around the holidays when my grandfather would get these envelopes. And these were tips that you would get over the holiday. And some envelopes, and let me pause, we're talking about like in the 60s, because it's important once I tell you. So some envelopes would have $5 or $10. Some envelopes would have $20, even $100. And that's a big tip. And so on Christmas morning, my aunt and my mom and my uncle, they would all come down and they would watch my grandfather open these envelopes. And he would open them all and he would line them up and count the 5s, the 10s, the 20s, the 100s maybe. And they would all sit in anticipation because they knew that he would pinch a little off for them and that my grandmother would get the biggest envelope with the biggest bills, of course, naturally. My freshman year in college was really hard. It was just really difficult adjusting. I was not a city girl, but I was from Chicago. I was in a place very different from me. I just had a hard time adjusting. So anytime I got to come home, I would. And on those visits home, I would always see my grandparents. And each visit home, my grandfather's health got worse than the visit before. But every time I saw my grandfather, he was so happy to see me. Pie, my pie, that's what he called me. On one visit home, my grandmother's best friend, Mrs. Bell, asked for my address and told me to anticipate something in the mail. Now, Mrs. Bell was a part of what was called the Couples Club. And the Couples Club was a social group that my grandparents were a part of. And they did things like have card parties. They would play pennies. To this day, I still don't know what pennies is. They would travel together. They raised their children together. They developed traditions together. And Mrs. Bell's tradition was to make homemade hot chocolate. So for any of the students who went away to school. So when I told my mom that Mrs. Bell had asked for my address, she kind of gave me a clue that that's what I was supposed to anticipate. Now at college, my obsession with the mail had grown to an all-time high. So knowing that Mrs. Bell was going to send me a package made me go to the receiving room on a regular basis to ask the work-study student had anything come for me. And they would say, nope, 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 nope. In November of 2003, that was a fall semester, I got a call from my mother and she told me that my grandfather had passed away. And the stress just at the time of exams, of adjusting, of being in Madison, Wisconsin, very different from Chicago, it was just all too much and I couldn't go home right away. I was sad because my grandfather died. He was the patriarch of our family. He was the man that I knew cared for me, loved me. That ride home was hard. I remember that we had the funeral the Saturday after Thanksgiving, and on Thanksgiving we went to view the body, and then we went back to my aunt's house to have dinner. And that dinner was different from any dinner. It was slower and quieter, with the occasional inappropriate joke from a cousin just to cut the tension, but it was just not the same. That ride back to school was a long, long ride back too. That felt like forever. But when I arrived back to school and got to the dorms, I saw that there was a package slip, one taped on the door and the other peeked at the bottom of the door. So the next day I went to the receiving room and I submitted my slip so that I can get my package. And they said something about the fact that the package had been there for a little bit, but the stress of the exams and losing my grandfather, I just stopped checking like I used to. So they gave me the package and they told me, well, they gave me the package. And they kept saying, well, the package had been here, but they didn't see it. And I honestly don't think that that's what happens. What my heart tells me is that that was the last delivery that my grandfather made before he made his trip home. Thank you.
This is a picture of my beautiful wife, Tracy. We've been together for 15 years. And this is called the Buddha in Your Mirror. And I practice Nichiren Buddhism, and my Buddhist practice means everything to me. It totally shapes how I live my life and everything. So it was a really pivotal book for me. So those are the two things, my contributions to our table. My favorite care package arrives every morning when I open my eyes and see my beautiful wife, Tracy, beside me, along with our 2-year-old doggy, Monty, who has claimed his space right between us. When I go downstairs to greet our other dog, Bella, with a pet and kiss before brewing morning coffee. When I receive a voicemail from my mother and have the good fortune of calling her back, and admittedly, not always right away, but fortunately she answers the phone and is doing just fine. We have a few good laughs mixed with banal conversation and moments of gratitude that mommy is still with me. When I look at myself in the mirror and on Zoom, and am startled by even how much more I resemble mommy now that I'm in my 40s. When my sister Nikki and I text each other to say we love each other and share LOL and heart emojis over YouTube videos of cats doing adorable kitty things and folks doing hilarious Iyanla Vanzant impressions. And when we have our Sunday calls for extended conversation that always ends in, I love you. When I get group texts from my sister circle of friends, asking each other, how you feeling this morning? Celebrating our successes, venting about our annoyances with family, friends, co-workers, jumping on individual and group Zoom calls to connect when one of us has yet another loved one or experienced a disappointment, break up or break down. And knowing that our sisterhood cuts across time zones and circumstances. When I come up for air and realize the best care package I have is breath. The earth and universe. Life within and around me. My biological and chosen family. My friends, my pets Bella and Monty, my wife Tracy, my sister circle of friends. When I enjoy the sunrise, gaze at the moon, and embrace that although my time on this earth is finite, energy is infinite. Thank you.
My care package in reference to this story includes a child's hair adornment with a bow, a brush, and some Jamaican black castor oil gel. But if I could have found it, it would have been Glover's mane. And now I'll tell you the story. My hair is the longest and healthiest it's ever been in my whole life, but this is not how it started. When I was a little girl, my hair would not grow. And this was a great source of pain for my mother and my grandmother. My hair was very, very, very short and natural. And because they just didn't know what to do about the fact that it wouldn't grow, they would put great big bows on top of my head. And my grandmother made my hair her project. And she worked on my head and worked on my head. And she finally came up with the combination of Glover's mane, which is tar, liquid tar, and Vaseline. And she would rub it into my head, and somehow the Glover's mane got my hair to start growing. The smell was horrific. When my hair started to grow, then she would straighten it. And I remember I was about first grade by the time I had enough hair so that it would come right here, and she would braid a braid in the top and put a bow on that. And then when she would get ready to send me to school, she would wrap it tightly with a silk scarf. Imagine this first-year-old girl walking to school with my hair wrapped with a silk scarf so that when I got there, not a single hair would be out of place. My hair was her package. She was invested in it. So when I went off to college and took a class with bell hooks and came back and decided I was going natural, and I came home and told my mother and my grandmother that I was going to cut off my straight hair, no one believed me. Even when I was walking out the door saying I'm going to the barbershop, no one believed me because to them it sounded insane. So when I walked back in the house with this short, natural hair, they gasped as if I had lost my mind. And my grandmother said, "Do you think we can get a wig?" So I kept my hair short and natural for about 20 years. And then I started to experiment with different things. And one of those experiments was that I decided I was going to have this crazy perm. And I got this perm, it was a texturizer. And as soon as I got it, I hated it. And so I started putting on gel, and I remember when I came home, my son said, "Mom, you really need a hat." And so I was putting on hats and putting on gel and wrapping it up, and it locked. Like, it did that because that's what it wanted to do. And I just left it alone. And it just kept growing and growing and growing. And when I go home and my mom sees me, she always says, "How much of that is really yours?" It's all mine, and it is my package on top of my head. It is important to me because it's symbolic of what happens when I just let my hair be. Like what happens when we just let ourselves be. Thank you.
I want to tell you about Ivy. She is diminutive, not even 5 feet, and small boned. She has dark brown hair cut into a Cleopatra bob, which I only learned recently because usually she is wearing what I call a hair hat, which is a bad wig that sits on your head in exactly the wrong way. She is always wearing black, with touches of lace in unexpected places. Sometimes it's a little frayed. Most days she wears no jewelry. Occasionally, she puts on a pretty necklace with an intricate chain and distinctive stone, usually a green one. She moves fast and a lot, reminding me of the Energizer Bunny in Wedges. She speaks in a high pitch, with the sing-song staccato accents of the languages where she was born. She often tells stories about how hard it was growing up in a big family that is now dispersed throughout the world. A brother here, a sister here, two sisters that she doesn't really like in Australia, and a brother still in Vietnam. She is the youngest, and when her mother died, she took care of her ailing father until his death. A father she still misses, a father who comes to her in her dreams. I wish mine did. She reminds me that life is struggle and work is necessary and hard. In every encounter, she asks me if I am working today, am I going to work, or am I leaving work, depending upon what time of day of the encounter. We know each other because she works where I go to take care of my body. She is one of the many folks who do such a great job there that I've been going there for decades. She does my nails. Those are the tools of her trade. And this is a relationship that almost never was. The first time I saw her was in the before COVID times. I watched this ball of energy move around, talking loudly, talking a lot, and the introvert in me made note never to book an appointment with her. I want quiet when I go to the spa. In the post-COVID times, when I felt safe enough to go back, she was often the only one there. Cuts and health benefits meant that not everybody came back when asked. Timing and necessity made my pre-COVID judgment impractical. I have booked many appointments since, and I've gotten to know her. She asks about my mother, I ask about her daughter. She asks me about dance class, and I ask her about her hikes. I used to hold my breath because of sentences that started with, "It's such a shame how violent the city is getting." Or, "My client said the South Side is very dangerous. Do you feel safe?" Not anymore. I don't hold my breath anymore. My nervousness about the pending racist comment dissipated on the day she shared how frightened she and her daughter were when so many Asian women were being attacked. How the women on her block would only go out in pairs or trios. How getting on the train to come to work took everything in her power. How she was always afraid for her child now. I could feel her fear. It was a fear I recognized as my own. It is a fear I know in my own Black body and female body. We commiserated about the trying times we were living in and connected very differently. Her touch is gentle strength, and recently I learned she can apparently read my body. The other day, while removing the gray no-trip polish, she asked me if I was dehydrated. I thought, well, that's an odd question, and told her it's likely. She asked me if I wanted a glass of water, and I moved my head in the direction of the white mug of lukewarm chamomile tea I was already drinking. "That's not enough," she scoffed. She gets up and walks over to the counter and gets me a glass of very cold cucumber spa water. "Drink up." When she freed my right hand, I did as I was told and finished the glass of water in 4 gulps. That was a direct order. I put the empty glass down and I asked, "How did you know?" "Your hands are cold and they are never cold. Water is important." I tell her that I am almost always dehydrated and even share a little bit about how I don't particularly like the taste of water, and that even at this age, my choice of drink is Coke, preferably cherry. She wrinkles her nose in disgust, but says nothing. The manicure continues and we talk about the colors we have chosen together. On this day, it's smoking hot and clay gathering. And we talk about how good they look and how beautiful the weather has been and how both of us are dreading the cold. We agree that it's the long stretches of gray, sunless days that make it all worse. Time's up. She's finished. It is time for her to take care of her next client, and I need to go to the bathroom because it's a long way back to the South Side. When I come out of the bathroom, the station is clean. My jacket has been taken down from the hook on the wall, and placed neatly onto my chair, and there is a second glass of water sitting there waiting for me. I smile. I drink my water and say, "Thank you, Ivy," with enough volume to carry across the room to be heard over the piped-in version of Prince's Purple Rain. She looks up from her tasks and says, "My pleasure. Go home and drink some more. Thank you."
Christmas is coming. And I remember, maybe I was 10 or 11. My dad started a tradition. He would bring out this bag of wrapped boxes and invite my mother and her 2 sisters and my grandmother and my cousin to pick one. And they would open their box, really curious. You know, that childhood fun thing of opening the wrap box, right? And it was perfume. Each one different. And they would open and spray and smell and then have somebody else smell too. Or I was too young for this. I got my own thing, like Love's Baby Soft. Maybe when I was older, I would get something else. But this went on for years, and every year was different. It was different scents. My mother would roll her eyes in this delight of all the women because she knew. I knew too. Daddy had just bought them the day before. He had gone to Lord & Taylor or Marshall Fields and walked through the first floor and went to every counter and said, you know, what's on special, what's already wrapped, put in the bag. I'm sure that's what happened, right? But how amazing that he had the resources to do that and the creativity to do that, because really what was fun was getting your own special thing. Even years after the pattern was established, I remember one of my aunts saying, like, "This is my favorite part of Christmas." And my mother rolling her eyes again, like, "I just bought them the day before." It was fun. It was really fun to watch and be a part of. In 2002, my Nana died. In 2005, Daddy died. In 2009, Auntie died. And even though we had kids of our own, Christmas just wasn't the same. I struggled with what should I get my mother and my aunt and my cousin. And eventually I decided that I should start my own tradition. And I made each one of them a little bag. And sometimes they would have something special and unique to them, but most of the times they were the same. They had something for their hands. Lotion, hand sanitizer in the pandemic, hard candy, sometimes chocolate too, maybe a little mirror, just small things that were individually wrapped in tissue paper. One time when I had them all lined up and the kids walked past in the dining room and said, "Those look like care packages." And I said, yeah, they are. Because tradition and showing that little love in that little wrap package, sometimes it's the best thing. Thank you.
Don't you love Christmas stories, holiday stories? My favorite all-time care package takes me back in time. As a young wife expecting my first baby, I realized that I was going to have my first Christmas away from family and away from home. As I let that sink in the midst of morning sickness, aloneness, piercing cold, and the very, very gray backdrop of Philadelphia and New Jersey. In the winter, the tears like the snow began to fall. Then one day, in early December, a very large package came to our apartment. I was lucky because the mailman brought it upstairs. As I examined the writing on the label, it was my mother's. She had the most beautiful hand script that I had ever seen in my life. I immediately tore into the package. So let me tell you what it contained. First of all, there was a tabletop Christmas tree. It wasn't exactly that. I couldn't find it because it was many, many years ago. But it's the kind that you stick together. And you all, some people are nodding their heads, and those of you who are younger are saying, what the heck is she talking about? That's okay. You stick them together. And then in addition to that, there were boxes of mini decorations. Some of them were glass, some of them were wooden. And I bet right now if we went to Chinatown, we could find them. There were a lot of small, but carefully wrapped gifts for me and for my husband. Now, the story about carefully wrapped gifts in our family goes like this. When we were kids, and there were 5 of us, we would assemble in the living room. My mother would put everything in boxes and she would tape them tightly. And then we would wrap. And then she would say, are you finished with that? You need to put a bow on it. We'd put a bow on it. And then she'd say, oh, that's for you. So I knew good and darn well she didn't like wrapping gifts. But all those small gifts she must have wrapped. Also included in the box were homemade cookies and homemade pralines. Now people, my family is from New Orleans. And we don't say pralines. We say pralines. So can I get everybody to just say pralines for me? Oh, thank you. That does my heart so good. And they were caramel and coconut, my favorites. There was also a large box with a big red bow on it and a tag with my name on it. It was my first maternity dress that she'd made for me. She was an amazing seamstress. And the dress, a Christmas dress, was beautiful. I kept that dress for years. There was also an envelope that said "Open Now" that contained Christmas cards by my mother and father that were signed, pictures from past Christmas holidays, and a letter. All of these gifts were wonderful, but the letter from my mother was the best gift of all. She was an amazing writer that could help you see the past and the future. It said that she sent the care package because she knew in her mother's heart that I'd be sad and missing our family Christmas together. She really wanted me to know that love stretches all the way across the country. That letter carried me through many a holiday season and some very rough times in my life. Most importantly, she said that our hearts would always be connected by love. Now, my mother has long gone on to glory, but I've learned that it's a mother's love, and it not only stretches across the miles, it reaches from heaven to earth. Merry Christmas.